Suzanne's Paparazzi Jewelry, 24/7 shopping available. 160920 is the code. Show her some love, like she showed us.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Coast to Coast Entertainment Network. I am Ace, and you're watching another episode of the Coast to Coast Red Tape Files. Tonight, I have with me my co-hosts for the evening, of course, our newest addition, none other than Joanna. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you guys? Another interesting case. I can't wait to dive in.
Absolutely. All right, mess around. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I got my naps in today, so I'm ready to roll.
Gotta have those naps, man. I'm telling you, gotta have those naps. All right. Well, how about we jump right into it? This case tonight, I'll tell you, I was actually glad that it had actually quite a bit of evidence to it. Like when you really research it and look through it, it actually had quite a bit. So this was the case of Trevelyan Evans. If I said it right, I hope I said the first name right, but I'm guessing it was Trevelyan by the way it was spelled. The disappearance took place June 6th of 1990. So, Joanne, I'll go ahead and I'll start out with you and give me kind of your first initial thoughts and how this all started.
I found this case to be very interesting. I don't know what my initial thoughts are. It seems it's very mysterious, obviously. At one point her husband was arrested, but I don't really see the link there. It's so absent of real concrete clues and evidence. It's hard to make a determination. I know that there was talk about her affiliation with a smartly dressed man. Mm-hmm. It's almost as if, she disappeared and ran off with him in my mind. I'm not sure. I don't know if I would classify it as a murder or simply a different disappearance, a middle-aged woman who was bored and took off. I don't know my impressions. I'm stumped on this one. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with this case. There's a lot there, but at the same time, they didn't have any, like you said, they wanted to point out it was her husband. Then the artist released a sketch of the guy they thought it was or whatever, and then they rolled that out, and then they thought it could have been a serial killer, Robin Legas, who's serving a life sentence for 3 murders of 3 men in 94. So I'm not sure where to go on this case. It's just weird.
Yeah, what I found interesting is that I know, Joe, you mentioned about the sharp-dressed man that they were pertaining to. The guy was a sharp-dressed man. He wore a suit, but he also carried a briefcase. And so I'm sitting there saying, what's up with the briefcase? Like, was he carrying around money? What exactly was he carrying around at this time? Nobody knows what was in the briefcase. And people were speculating, saying, was it her, like, lover, her side lover, or whatever? Was she having an affair with this guy? That poses a question. So that's why a lot of people look at this sharp-dressed man, because that's who she was with a lot, was this sharp-dressed. And that's what got me. That's where I'm stumped, is who is this guy?
Right, and he never came forward. And it seems odd because it's a very small town. And apparently 30 people, she owned an antique shop, and throughout the course of that day, they said 25 to 30 people had already been in that morning. She was well known, well liked. She was planning on going away. Her husband was away, and it seemed as if she was very happy with life. But you never know what's going on in people's lives or minds. I mean, it makes me think about that case that was just, the case of even the case that occurred today, the corrections officer and the inmate who took off from Alabama, and unfortunately she took her own life tonight, but they were found. But everybody says, Vicky White was very happy. She was, she loved her life. She was about to retire, but the reality was apparently she wasn't that happy, and her life a lot was going on in her life behind the scenes. So, Trevelyan is similar in many ways. She was a middle-aged woman. She, wasn't she wasn't overly attractive. She was just a plain average woman. So, she's a very unassuming. People probably, you forget though, people have personal lives and things are going on behind the scenes. Maybe she was having an affair.
Very, very well could have. So, mess around. I'm going to ask you this question. What do you think? This is interesting though too, because if you remember, she put a note on the door that said, "I'll be back in a couple minutes." There was a, I guess it was kind of like a store/restaurant type thing that she came in. She bought a banana and an apple, and then they found a banana peel outside of the antique store. So, mess around. What do you think? Like, do you think that because it was said multiple times that that banana could have been eaten earlier in the day. That may not have been the banana that she bought.
You're right. Who's to say it was her banana? I mean, it could be anybody's banana. There's how many people that walk along that street all day, unless they got her DNA off the banana. I don't know who eats the banana peel though.
Well, no, I don't think that they're talking about who eats the banana peel. I just think that they're saying it's kind of a coincidence that she got a banana and an apple, and then this banana peel was found in the trash can next to her store.
Well, I guess they get her fingerprints off the banana peel.
They could. I don't know if they actually ever attempted to do that, but
Probably died with the banana peel. Who cares?
I thought the banana peel was actually found in a garbage pail in the shop.
No, it could have been, but I thought from what I read, it showed it was outside the shop. I thought that's what it said. Don't quote me. I'm not 100%. You could absolutely be right. But
it says here it was found in the shop.
Okay, in the shop. So there you go. So it probably was her. But my question for you, Joe, on this one was going to be, because Mess Around brought up an interesting point, and I know that you were kind of in this field for a while. Is it possible to actually get fingerprints off of a banana peel?
I think you could get fingerprints off of the banana peel. It would be very difficult to, and just because of the surface. But I'm sure we could get fingerprints off of that. I mean, technology has evolved to that point. So I'm guessing they probably didn't in 1990. I'm sure they probably didn't take the fingerprints off the peel if it was found in the shop. I'm sure it was presumed to be hers. And it would have been, and I think that the controversy about the banana peel was exactly that. They don't know if it was the banana that she had bought. They didn't find the apple that she has supposedly taken. But I think the interesting part about the banana is they're saying they're not sure if she returned to the shop. But I'm guessing she probably did return to the shop, in my perception, because of the banana peel, but also because her purse was there. If she walked across the street to get the banana and the apple, I mean, most women are going to take their purse. Her purse was there, her purse was there, her keys were there, her jacket was still there. Some additional fruit and flowers that she intended to bring home were there. So I think when she left and she put that sign on the door, "Be back in 2 minutes," maybe she came into the shop and somebody was in the shop. I mean, somebody had walked in and the sign was there, and they had, were in the course of a robbery. That may seem like that could probably be a potential. She walked in on somebody after she returned from that store.
My interesting question on that would be, that's definitely an interesting theory. But do you think that if she locked up the shop and she came back to somebody in the shop, there would have been some kind of forced entry upon, getting back to, maybe somebody would have seen something. Somebody would have seen somebody trying to break in the shop.
Potential, but remember, in a small town in England, she may not have locked the door.
True. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just a different time there. It's a different time, a different genre. Maybe the back door was open. Who knows? It said even after she left, I mean, the town was so close knit and people seemed to be so trustworthy that people were buying things from the outside of the store and putting the money through. They had a slot there to put the money in. So they must have been trustworthy. It must have been a place where they trusted people, or they wouldn't have items outside the store for people to purchase. I'm guessing all of that and that's speculation, but small towns in England are notorious for that type of camaraderie and populace. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering about that too, because when I was looking at that, I thought it was very interesting because I can tell you I don't know much about England. I just thought it was kind of interesting how these people would buy things and then actually stick the money in the slot. I was like, that's some flat out trust right there. Like, you would have to trust anybody who came up. That must have been a very small community, close niche that everybody knows everybody, but except for that sharp dressed man.
Well, that was going to be my next point. It's like most of the times when disappearances like this happen, it's like over half the time it's somebody they knew or know that have done something to him or abducted him or whatever. So I think it was somebody she knew that and she trusted that made her disappear.
Agreed.
Yeah. Did you guys also see how they had built that like bench type statue for Trevelyan Evans, and then it was like vandalized, like people like scribbling on it, like cutting out the name and everything. It was actually a very, very sad occurrence when I saw it. I'm like, why would somebody want to vandalize a bench like that? And then a lot of people were speculating. And of course, when things like that happen, the speculation starts. The speculation starts saying that whoever did it but it's hard to sit here and say that she was, kidnapped and murdered. That's the tough thing, because we have no idea. But I think the only clues that when you think about it is, it's just like you said, Joe, all of her stuff was left behind in the shop. That's what makes it interesting, being like, okay, if she wasn't kidnapped and murdered, why would she just walk away and leave all of her stuff in the shop? Her purse, her keys, everything.
And her bank accounts never accessed. But I'm not sure if you read everything about the bench. Not only was the bench defaced, somebody actually had a plaque inscribed on the bench saying that she had been found buried at a golf course and then exhumed, and then they defaced it. So it wasn't even just written. Somebody actually had an inscription made and mounted into the bench saying that she had been found. So I found that to be very odd. And I don't know if you had read. I read, how I'm always interested in hearing the psychic's perspective. And there's a website out there, medium.com, and psychics weigh in. And one of the psychics mediums said that they really think that the area around that holiday home that she shared with her husband, she said her hunch is that they should do some digging around there. So who knows? Her husband, I mean, I'm wondering why they arrested her husband 10 years later. What was the basis for that? There must have been some evidence to point to him, or they wouldn't have led to his arrest so far afterwards. And unfortunately, he's now deceased. But it's interesting to know if her husband was involved and what that connection was. Why was he arrested at that time?
From my understanding, from what I read, the reason why they arrested the husband was simply because he was kind of one of those people that had the conspiracy theory that she did have a lover on the side. And so that was his theory too. So then everybody was like, okay, so he has this theory that she's seeing somebody on the side. And so that's when they put two and two together, being like, maybe the husband wanted to get rid of her because of this reason, or get rid of the guy or whatever. And so that's kind of where all that speculation started. Mess around.
Well, they got that, and then I was reading about the brothers that had told the cops that to dig up the bar, and then they did, but nothing was found. And then they complained to the police chief about the handling of the search. And then they brought a camera and they claimed that they found human remains under the club's floorboards, but they had been removed by the time the police carried out their investigation. So I don't know, just all kinds of crazy theories thrown out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was another one of those very interesting cases, to say the least. But Joe, it sounded like you were going to say something.
I was wondering if the couple had any children. They never really spoke about her family and if that was any connection, but I'm assuming she didn't, or they would have spoken about her. So just, yeah, I find it very, I just find it interesting because she was I think when we usually see people who disappear, they're young, they have some sort of sordid life, they're involved with somebody who's, even the sharply dressed man, they said he was a man in his 60s. We don't usually think of abductors as men in suits wearing briefcases and in their mid 60s, very put together and businesslike. So yeah, I think this is one of those mysteries that really is a mystery.
Going back to what kind of mess around was saying before about the Hollywell guy that they said was that could have potentially been involved in this whole thing. There was actually a witness who kind of came out, and the reason why they kind of went away from the Hollywell thing was that they were actually saying that he was living in an entirely different place at the time that she had disappeared. So they were trying to go out there saying, how can he be involved when he was living in a different place, which I do believe that the place was Augusta. But not to say that he wasn't involved in some way, but this is what the person was saying. They were trying to give him an alibi, so to say. Whether the alibi was correct, because it's one witness. It was one witness that said he was living somewhere else. But when they asked him if he was living somewhere else, if he could show proof, he said, I'm living somewhere else, but I don't have proof that I was actually living there. So that's what kind of threw up the red flag to me. Dave, it looked like you want to say something else.
Yeah, there were two different sightings over. I don't know if we covered this or not yet, but one in 235, a woman matching her description walking out of town along the A5 towards Corinne beside Riverside Park, and 345, there's another sighting, this time by a woman walking into Park Avenue from the direction of River D, but nothing ever came from that.
Yeah, I do remember that. And Brandon says, "What's up, guys?" So welcome in Brandon, welcome in William Hudson, and then Imes was asking, who we talking about? We're talking about Trevelyan Evans. But yeah, those were the two sightings that was there. So that's kind of what's puzzling to me, is because these sightings were supposedly after she had disappeared. So, Joe, when you think about these two sightings that they had supposedly after she disappeared, does this kind of make you think that maybe she did just kind of up and disappear on her own?
I don't know. No, I don't think she disappeared on her own, because I think that she would have come back. I mean, she had a brother. I read a quote from the chief detective who said, "It is without a doubt the strangest inquiry I've ever been involved with. How a happily married woman could vanish without a trace on a Saturday morning in a busy town center is totally baffling." And I think that sums it up. I don't think that she had any trouble. Nothing was ever, uncovered that she was leading a double life. So I'm guessing she probably was abducted. But it's really astounding in some ways that whomever did it just completely got away with it, in my mind, we never uncovered a body. We never found any clues whatsoever. But that's also to be said, it's probably speaking about technology and police and detective work, just the same way that in a small town people are very trusting, oftentimes it's very common in small towns that police work is shoddy. So maybe they didn't have the tools and equipment, especially back in 1990 in England, to really do a thorough investigation of the case. So that's probably played a role in it as well.
And come to think of it, that is pretty accurate because it happened in 90. And so, it's a completely different world now. The technology is completely different. So what they can do now, they couldn't even close to be doing what they did back then. But Jason is saying maybe a doppelganger. So maybe it could have been somebody that looked just like her and somebody thought it was her.
Could be.
Could be. I mean, she was, she looked like a typical, my family came from Europe and I've been to London, I've been to Ireland, and she was pretty nondescript. She looked like my aunt. I mean, the short, middle-aged woman, short hair that, with a reddish tone. That's a very common appearance for middle-aged women in that time period. So she could have very easily been mistaken for any other woman, middle-aged woman, just walking down the street in that town.
Yeah, I think just the interesting thing that I want to know, like, especially if the person is going to step forward and said that, they saw her at this time. They never specifically said at that time if she was spotted with the same gentleman that people saw her with before. Now, if they saw her with that same gentleman, then it could be like, okay, maybe it wasn't somebody that looked just like her. Maybe it was indeed her. That's kind of where I'm curious and kind of want to know.
I'm just kind of curious, like, she disappeared or was abducted or whatever happened to her. None of the money was taken out of her account. Her money's still all there. It was still all there.
Yeah, so that makes you wonder. So would robbery have indeed been the case? Because no money was gone from the shop. Her purse and everything was still there. Nothing was touching her bank account. So what was the motive? If
Her car was left where it was parked.
Yeah. So what was the motive?
It's funny. I mean, when you look at a lot of these cases, sometimes there is no motive. It's just a crime of opportunity. Sometimes the motive is simply that somebody has an overwhelming desire to kill somebody. Right? I mean, a lot of these cases, that's simply it. I mean, it comes out in the end that this person just was preoccupied with thoughts of murder and they weren't going to be satisfied until they did it. So I don't know. So I'm thinking it was someone, though, who was pretty polished. I mean, she wouldn't just walk away with a teenager, or there had to be some coercion, unless it was somebody she knew. She just was going to stroll out of her shop with, it had to be, I'm thinking it had to be a man. I don't think she would have left with a woman, but that's my perception.
Unless she really knew the woman, and I don't know. I want to say unless she really knew the woman and then left for some reason because the woman's like, oh, let's go here, and then she would have had something to do with it. It's all like this whole thing is really confusing to me because there's like a few key aspects that I want to know that was never revealed. Who's that sharp-dressed man that nobody stepped forward and said anything about? Why was everything still left at the shop? Why was her car left? Hollywell, there was things that pointed towards him, but then there was things against him. They also found some sketches on him about like different, like what they called like beauty spots that they were saying, a body could have been dumped or whatever. But nothing came about the sketches because the police didn't want to release any of that information at first because they didn't want to overwhelm the family and stress out the family. And so that's why they would reach out to other people too, saying, don't say anything if you're not exactly sure about what happened, because we don't want to put stress on that family. But these are things that I really, really want to know, is that if it was such a tight niche community, like you're saying, it potentially could have been, why can't anybody identify this one male that she was with? And maybe that's where the answers are laying, right there on this individual.
True.
But Mess Around, your thoughts?
I think it truthfully, I think if somebody she knew, I don't think she's just gonna walk away with somebody she doesn't know unless she was forced. But to for me, I think it's someone she knew that did it.
So you're saying a close friend.
Close friend, family member, maybe the husband. Who knows? I know he was like Joanne said, he was charged, jailed, and released, but maybe he did do it. Who knows? There's so many theories out there on what happened, but
Maybe. All right. Well, yeah, we're definitely getting to that time now. So, Joanne, I will go ahead and I'll kind of start with you and kind of give your final thoughts on the case, and then any final thoughts leading in next week.
Well, I think my final thought on it, I think that this case will never be solved. I think it's going to be because, her husband is deceased. She's gone. Her brother's, in his mid 70s now. Unfortunately, it's going to die one of those unfortunate, it's just going to be one of those unfortunate accounts that we're never going to get to the bottom of. So I think that's always the most heartbreaking thing. It's just going to fade off into the sunset. So interesting. It was a good case, but unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to get the answers we're looking for.
Probably not. And it makes me wonder, though. It always makes me wonder, why, if somebody knows something, are they afraid to come forward and say anything? That's what I've always wondered. I'm like, what would somebody be afraid of? Is maybe they could be afraid of retaliation, potentially, if they know that somebody did murder her or whatever. They're afraid that something might happen to them. But I've always said, think about putting yourself in her family's shoes. If you know anything, why not just speak up and say it? That's kind of always been my thinking. Mess Around, your final thoughts on this case.
yeah, I think I'm with Joanne on this one. Anytime a case is this old, like 30 some odd years old, it's very rare that a case has been cold this long gets solved. So I don't think it's ever going to be solved.
Yeah, these cases are rarely solved at times, and it's definitely heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking, because we always look for those closures, especially for the family. It's always good to be able to bring that person home, bring that loved one home, so the family can have some closure at this point. However, at this point in time, I don't know exactly the family out there that right now is trying to solve the case, because it didn't talk a whole lot about family. So I don't know who out there would be looking right now. But we definitely want to thank everybody for watching. Dave, Amy wants to know if you have your Dr. Pepper.
I have a Dr. Pepper bottle with water in it. Does that count?
All right. Well, I guess it's close. But we definitely want to thank everybody for watching another episode of the Red Tape Files. Tune in next week for a brand new case. Eventually, like we were talking about, I think we're going to start it to where we kind of go around the whole U.S. We go from coast to coast. So we figure out a case from each state. We start there, and we go around the whole United States. I think it'll be awesome. So tune in each and every week. We'll have a brand new case for you. So with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic night, and we will see you tomorrow for Tuesday Night Mania and On Deck. So have a fantastic night.